They said the mute trapper was dangerous. She said he was the gentlest man she knew. The trapper's name was Lorne Daubigny. He was 34 years old. He lived in a cabin on the North Fork of the Salmon River in the Idaho Territory. And the living was alone. And the alone was the condition of a man who could not speak. Not would not, but could not. The could not, the result of a fever that had taken his voice when he was 11 years old, the fever burning through his throat, the way a fire burns through a stand of timber, destroying the thing that allows sound. And the destroying was permanent, and the permanent was the silence, and the silence was Lorne. He trapped beaver and marten and fox. He trapped them the way his father had trapped them and his grandfather had trapped them. The Daubignys were French-Canadian, 3 generations removed from Quebec, the generations of migration southward and westward that followed the fur and the rivers, because fur lives near rivers, and trappers follow the fur the way rivers follow gravity, inevitably, toward the lowest point. And the lowest point was the Idaho Territory, and the Idaho Territory was home. The town nearest to Lorne's cabin was Elk Bend, which was 11 miles south, and which was the place Lorne went once a month to trade pelts for supplies. Flour, salt, coffee, ammunition, the staples of a trapper's life. The staples carried on a mule, and the mule led by a man who did not speak. And the not speaking was the strangeness, and the strangeness was the fear, because people fear what they do not understand. And a man who does not speak is a man who cannot be understood, and the not understood is the dangerous. They called him dangerous. The calling was the rumor that circulates in small towns the way water circulates in a well, going around and around without going anywhere, the going around producing a consensus that is not based on evidence but on repetition, and the repetition was this: the mute trapper is dangerous. The mute trapper lives alone in the mountains. Alone men are unpredictable. Unpredictable men are dangerous. Dangerous men should be avoided, and the avoiding was what the town did. They avoided him at the trading post. They stepped aside when he entered. They conducted business with him quickly. The efficiency of discomfort. The discomfort of standing near a man who cannot answer questions, and whose silence is interpreted as menace, because menace is the easiest interpretation of silence, easier than sadness, easier than isolation, easier than the truth, which was that Lorne Daubigny was not dangerous. Lorne Daubigny was lonely, and loneliness is the opposite of danger. Loneliness is the absence of the thing that makes danger possible, which is connection, and Lorne had no connection. Cecily Marsh was the school teacher. She was 28 years old. She had come to Elk Bend from Portland because Portland had more school teachers than schools, and Elk Bend had more schools than school teachers. 1 school and 0 school teachers. The 0 the vacancy, and the vacancy was the opportunity, and the opportunity was Cecily's, because Cecily went where she was needed, and needed was Elk Bend. She taught 12 children in a 1-room schoolhouse on the edge of town. She taught reading and writing and arithmetic and geography. The geography, the maps on the wall that showed places the children would probably never visit. The never visiting not a limitation but a horizon, because horizons are the things you look toward even when you cannot reach them, and looking toward is the beginning of reaching. She first saw Lorne at the trading post in October. She saw him the way a teacher sees, which is to say she saw not the rumor, but the person, because teachers are trained to see past the surface of things, to see past the misbehavior to the child, past the wrong answer to the misunderstanding, past the silence to the reason for the silence. And the reason for Lorne's silence was visible to Cecily, because Cecily looked, and looking is the thing most people in Elk Bend had stopped doing. She saw a man who moved carefully. The carefully was not the careful of a predator. It was the careful of a person who knows that his presence makes people uncomfortable, and who minimizes the discomfort by minimizing the presence, by being smaller than he is, quieter than he already is, less visible than a man of his size should be. Lorne was tall and broad, and capable of filling a room with his body, but he did not fill rooms. He occupied corners, edges, the margins of spaces, the way a person occupies a margin when the center is not available to them. She saw his hands. His hands were doing the speaking his throat could not, pointing at items on the shelf, holding up fingers to indicate quantities, placing coins on the counter with the precision of a man who has learned that transactions must be completed without ambiguity, because ambiguity is resolved by words, and he has no words, and the no words requires that every gesture be clear, and clarity was what his hands produced, the hands that were large and scarred from traps and weather, and the particular roughness of a life lived entirely outdoors. "Good morning," Cecily said. She said it to Lorne, and the saying was the violation of the avoidance that the town maintained the way a town maintains a fence, collectively, without discussion, the fence simply there because everyone agrees to keep it there. Cecily did not agree. Cecily had not agreed since she arrived, because Cecily did not agree with exclusions based on characteristics that people cannot control, and silence caused by a childhood fever is a characteristic that cannot be controlled. Lorne looked at Cecily. The looking was the surprise of a man who has not been greeted in a town for 3 years. 3 years of entering the trading post and completing transactions, and leaving without a single person speaking to him except the shopkeeper, who spoke the minimum required for commerce, and the minimum was prices and totals and the word anything else, and anything else was not a greeting, anything else was the end. He nodded. The nod was the response, the only response available to a man without a voice, the nod that says, "I hear you, and I acknowledge you, and I am grateful for the acknowledging," the gratitude contained in the angle of the head, which was slight and respectful, and produced with the care of a man who knows that even nods can be misinterpreted, and that misinterpretation is the hazard of a life without words. Cecily smiled. The smile was the second violation. The smile was the thing that broke the fence, because fences break at the point where someone pushes, and the push was the smile, and the breaking was the beginning. She began leaving things on the trading post counter for him. She left them with the shopkeeper, who agreed to pass them along because the shopkeeper was not cruel. The shopkeeper was merely compliant with the town's avoidance, and compliance is not cruelty. Compliance is the path of least resistance, and the path of least resistance is the path most people take. She left a book. The book was a primer, the kind of book she used in her schoolhouse, the kind that teaches letters and words, and the leaving was the question, "Can you read?" The question was answered the next month when Lorne came to the trading post and placed on the counter a piece of bark on which he had written, in careful block letters, "Thank you for the book. I can read. My mother taught me." The bark was the conversation. The bark was the first conversation Lorne had had with anyone except the shopkeeper in 3 years, and the firstness was the opening of a door that had been closed by a fever when he was 11, and that had stayed closed because doors that are closed by illness stay closed until someone opens them, and Cecily was opening the door. She wrote him a letter. She wrote it on paper, and left it at the trading post, and the letter said, "My name is Cecily Marsh. I am the schoolteacher. I would like to know you." The would-like was the invitation, and the invitation was unprecedented. No one in Elk Bend had invited Lorne to anything, not to a church social, not to a barn raising, not to a meal, the not inviting the exclusion, and the exclusion had been total until Cecily. Lorne wrote back. He wrote on paper this time, paper he had bought at the trading post, buying the first purchase that was not flour or salt or coffee or ammunition, the first purchase that was communication, the first purchase that served the soul rather than the body. He wrote, "I would like to be known. I have not been known in a long time." The letters continued. They continued through the winter, carried by the monthly trips to the trading post, the trips that had been transactions and that were now correspondences. The correspondences, the relationship built on paper, because paper was the medium available to a man without a voice. And paper is a sufficient medium because paper carries words, and words carry meaning, and meaning carries connection, and connection was the thing being built. In the letters, Lorne told Cecily about the mountains. He told her about the way the Salmon River sounds in January, when ice forms along the banks, and the water runs beneath the ice. And the running beneath is a sound that is quieter than the running over, the sound of water insulated by ice, the insulation producing a hush that is the most peaceful sound in the world. He told her about the marten, how it moves through trees the way water moves through rock, finding the path that exists, not making a new one. He told her about the stars above his cabin, how the stars in the Idaho Territory are brighter than stars anywhere, because the anywhere has lamplight, and lamplight competes with starlight, and the Idaho Territory has no lamplight, and therefore the stars win, and winning is brightness. In the letters, Cecily told Lorne about the children. She told him about the Foley boy who could not read until she discovered that he could not see the blackboard, the not seeing the cause of the not reading, and the discovering the solution a pair of spectacles ordered from a catalog, and the spectacles producing reading, and the reading producing joy, and joy is the payment of teaching. She told him about the maps on the wall, and how the children touched the maps the way they touched windows, pressing their fingers against the surface as if they could push through to the other side, and the other side was the world, and the world was the thing the maps promised. The town talked. The town talked about Cecily writing letters to the mute trapper the way the town talked about everything, in whispers, in glances, in the particular code of small-town disapproval that is not spoken directly, but is communicated through the angle of heads, and the set of mouths, and the absence of invitations. Cecily was not invited to Mrs. Beaumont's quilting circle. Cecily was not invited to the harvest supper at the church. The not inviting was the punishment for the violation of the fence. Cecily did not care. The not caring was not indifference. It was the priority of a woman who had decided that the exclusion of a man for the crime of being unable to speak was a greater wrong than the exclusion of a woman for the crime of being kind, and the greater wrong was the thing she would address, and the addressing was the letters and the smiles and the greeting and the refusal to participate in the avoidance. In March, she rode to his cabin. She rode the 11 miles on a Saturday, through the late winter landscape that was still snow-covered, but softening. The prelude to spring, and spring was the thing that was happening between them, the thawing of a man who had been frozen by silence, and by the town's interpretation of his silence. Lorne's cabin was small and clean and orderly. The orderly was the precision of a man who compensates for the chaos of voicelessness with the order of his physical world. Everything in its place, every tool hung, every pelt stretched on its frame, every surface swept. The cabin said, "I am not the man you think I am. I am not dangerous. I am careful. I am precise. I am a man who keeps his world in order, because the world inside me, the world of words I cannot say, is disordered, and the disorder requires compensation, and the compensation is this cabin." Lorne was at the door when she arrived. He was at the door because he had heard the horse, and hearing is the sense that compensates for the absence of voice. Lorne heard everything, heard with the attention of a man who cannot contribute sound, and who therefore receives sound with the intensity that the non-contributing allows. He had a piece of paper ready. The paper said, "You came." "I came," Cecily said. "I came because letters are not enough. Letters are the approximation of knowing, and approximation is not the thing itself, and the thing itself is this: standing in front of you, seeing your face, seeing your cabin, seeing the life you have made in the silence, and the seeing is the knowing, and the knowing is why I rode 11 miles. Lorne wrote on the paper, "I am glad." "I know you are glad. Your face says you are glad. Your face is the most honest face I have ever seen, because your face has done all your speaking for 23 years, and a face that speaks for 23 years becomes fluent, and your fluency is the beauty, and the beauty is the reason I am here." The town held a meeting. The meeting was about Cecily, specifically about whether a schoolteacher who associated with the mute trapper was a suitable schoolteacher. The suitability the question. The question, really about conformity, rather than competence, because Cecily's competence was not in dispute. The Foley boy could read. The maps were touched. The children were learning. And competence was not the issue. Conformity was. Cecily attended the meeting. She attended the way Bess Laurier had attended a meeting in Prescott, Kansas, by walking in when she was not expected, and standing when everyone else was sitting, and speaking when everyone else thought the speaking was finished. Lorne Daubigny is not dangerous, Cecily said. Lorne Daubigny lost his voice to a fever when he was 11 years old. Lorne Daubigny has lived alone in a cabin for 3 years, because this town decided that a man who cannot speak is a man to fear, and the deciding was wrong. And wrong decisions that are not corrected become cruelties, and cruelties that are maintained by a community are the community's shame. The room was quiet. The quiet was the recognition that the school teacher was right, and that being right is the thing that cannot be argued against, because arguments against rightness are arguments for wrongness, and no one in Elk Bend wanted to argue for wrongness. "He is the gentlest man I know," Cecily said. "He writes about rivers and stars and martins. He keeps his cabin cleaner than any house in this town. He has never harmed anyone. He has never threatened anyone. The only thing he has ever done is be silent, and silence is not a crime, and the treating of silence as a crime is the thing that should be discussed at this meeting, not my suitability." The meeting ended without a vote. It ended because the ending was the only option, the option produced by shame, the shame that arrives when a truth is spoken that reveals the lie, and the lie was that Lorne Daubigny was dangerous, and the truth was that Lorne Daubigny was gentle, and gentle had won. The next month, when Lorne came to the trading post, Mrs. Beaumont said good morning. The good morning was the fence coming down, one board at a time, the boards removed by the force of a schoolteacher who understood that fences built from fear are the flimsiest structures, and flimsy structures do not survive the wind, and the wind was Cecily Marsh.